Hello everyone, I hope you're doing okay in the isolation period. It's been a while now. I think we're actually starting to get used to this now, isn't it? And that's a very weird thing to say. I noticed I was on my state sanctioned one exercise per day yesterday or the day before. And I was walking along and thinking, this is now like my regular routine of I go for my one walk every day. I do my calls every day. I do my social Zooms a couple times a week. I've now got my routine of kind of social events in the calendar that I do with friends and family. So I think we are getting used to this. And I think we're getting used to this only because it's starting to become a very similar thing each day. Hello, for those of you who are tuning in, let me know who you are in the comments below. I can see the eyeballs, but I can't see your names popping up. There's something weird with my phone on lives where the names don't always come up when people are going on live. But I do see you. I do see the eyeballs. Welcome. Let me know who you are and where you're tuning in from today. I think the self-isolation period has become so routine and familiar for us because it is just kind of the same thing again and again and again and again. And me and my wife were joking that this is a little bit like Groundhog Day. And we thought, wouldn't it be funny in this repeated pattern of day after day if we watched the film Groundhog Day? I had watched the film, my wife hadn't watched it. I had only watched it once, maybe about 10 years ago, so I could remember the general plot and I could remember the general synopsis. But actually, when we started watching it as our evening film last night, I didn't realise actually how much depth there is to this film and how much we can actually extract from the film in terms of useful life lessons and useful life philosophies. So I thought I would come on here today in our sort of real life Groundhog Day that we find ourselves in and share with you some of what I picked up from watching the film last night and how we can transfer that into this situation that we find ourselves in now, which is something that we feel is somewhat repetitive, is something that we feel trapped in, like Bill Murray's character Phil Connors in the film, and how we can extract ultimately how Bill Murray's character ultimately resolves Groundhog Day in the film. Now, obviously, there's going to be some pretty big spoilers for this film, so if you haven't watched Groundhog Day already, then make sure you watch it before you watch this session. So this is my homework for you, to go and watch Groundhog Day if you haven't already seen it. If you don't feel that you're ever going to watch Groundhog Day, these lessons are still going to be applicable and useful, regardless of whether you've seen the film or even whether you want to see the film. Because I'll give some context and some outline as to how each of these things come up in the film and how we can ultimately apply them to this situation here. So thank you everyone who's tuning in. As I said to you a little bit earlier, pop in the comments below who you are and where you're tuning in from. I think this situation that we find ourselves in really has connected us on a more global level. It's an experience that we're all going through at the same time. So it's been great to actually be connecting with people across the world in this virtual manner. So let me know who you are and where you're tuning in from today. So let's get started. Let's look at some of the things that I picked up from watching the film last night. Bill Murray's character, Phil Connors, is a weatherman who gets sent into the rural backwaters of Pennsylvania to go to a town's Groundhog Day ceremony. The Groundhog ceremony is where a groundhog is pulled out of a tree trunk, and then the groundhog communicates whether winter is over or whether there's going to be another 6 weeks of winter. Phil Connors is a really arrogant, egotistical man. And this is going to be his final time after 4 years of reporting that he's going to go and do what he considers to be a really trivial backwater journalistic assignment. So he's looking forward to this being his last Groundhog Day, and he's very disparaging to his colleagues and to people that he's speaking about what this ceremony is all about. Phil Connors wakes up on the 2nd of February, Groundhog Day. He goes to the town ceremony, he reports on it. The groundhog communicates to the village elders that there are going to be another 6 weeks of winter. Phil Connors doesn't really care. Him and his crew get in the van and they're about to travel back to Pittsburgh, which is where their news station is based, and a howling blizzard comes in and they're forced to stay in this small town. Phil Connors goes to bed and he wakes up, and the first thing that he notices is weird is that when his alarm clock goes off, it starts playing the exact same portion of the radio station he had listened to yesterday. And it starts talking about Groundhog Day on the radio. Very quickly, Phil Connors realizes he's woken up on the exact same day, Groundhog Day. And for the entire film, he keeps on waking up on this exact same day, Groundhog Day. He is doomed to repeat this day over and over. So this is the basic premise of the film. And we actually know from the colloquial term Groundhog Day that Groundhog Day is when we feel like we're doing the same thing over and over. Because in this film, that's literally what Bill Murray's character does. When he realizes that he's repeating the same day over and over, he has different approaches to this. And I've illustrated that with these letters here, and you'll notice they're split in two. Here's the two approaches that don't work for him. The first of these approaches, when Phil Connors discovers that he's waking up on the same day again and again, no matter what, he first embarks on hedonism. Hedonism, the pursuit of pleasure. So on one particular scene, he goes into the local diner and just orders all of the food. He just keeps on eating and eating because he knows he won't put on any weight. He knows he isn't going to have any long-lasting health problems because he's just going to wake up and do the same day again and again. Another thing that he does is he finds an attractive lady and he starts asking her questions about her childhood. And what he essentially does is he then pretends to be a friend of hers from school so that he can grab dinner with her, so he can go on a date with her, and eventually so he can seal the deal with her on Groundhog Day. Another thing that he does is goes to a bar, he gets really drunk with a couple of the locals, and then he goes joyriding. And he ends up getting caught by the police, he gets put in the town jail, but of course he wakes up on the same day as if nothing had happened. So this is the first approach that his character takes, is this pursuit of hedonism, pursuing pleasure, pursuing the things that basically he knows he can do anything with no costs and no consequences. And I think actually this is how we first approached the isolation period, wasn't it? We said to ourselves, right, well, we're stuck indoors, so we're going to be binging on those Netflix seasons. We're going to be ordering in the crates of wine. We too had this approach of hedonism, of, well, you know what? I'm in a crappy situation. I can't do anything about it. I can't get out of it. So why don't I just try and enjoy myself in some regard? What Bill Murray's character realizes in the film is this hedonism gets boring very quickly. That just stuffing yourself full of food, getting drunk, having sex isn't really fulfilling for him. Just repeating the same thing again and again, knowing there's no cost, knowing there's no consequences, actually stops being that fun. And I think we've maybe got to this point in our isolation quarantine saga, haven't we? Where we were binging the Netflix, we were having the glass of wine at 3:30 on a Tuesday afternoon, but that's become boring real quick, hasn't it? And this is what happens for Phil Connors in the film Groundhog Day as well. And so he quickly moves from hedonism into despair. And I think perhaps this is where some of us have arrived now. Depending on where you're tuning in from the world, you've been in this isolation quarantine process for anywhere between 3 and 6 weeks, right? I think now we're just starting to get to the point of, is this ever going to end? Am I ever going to be able to do the things that I enjoyed again? Are we ever going to be able to lift these restrictions? Are we going to live in a world where we don't have this fear and panic hanging over us? So I think a lot of people are dropping into despair at this point. And this is what happens for Phil Connors in the film Groundhog Day. He realizes that I'm trapped in this day. I can't get out of it. And yes, I did these fun, silly things, but that got boring real quickly. So at this point in the film, it takes a little bit of a dark turn. There's a bit of a kind of dark humour satire in this, where Phil Collins' character then tries to kill himself. And he tries all of these different ways of killing himself. He tries crashing a car, he tries jumping off a building, he tries stepping in front of a lorry. And what he finds again and again is that every time he dies, he wakes up on Groundhog Day once again. He's caught in this cycle of despair. And he starts gushing to his colleagues that he wakes up with every single day. He starts trying to explain the situation to them. He says, what would you do if you knew that today was going to be your last day? What would you do if you found out that you kept on repeating things over and over in your life? What would you do if you found out you couldn't die? And he tries to share his situation with his colleagues. But of course, he can't explain things over the long term because actually his colleagues are also repeating that day. They start off the day with the same lack of information about Bill Murray's situation, Phil Connors' situation, each and every day. So when he tries to explain his situation, they just have forgotten it by the time that he restarts Groundhog Day. So he's getting into this place of despair where he's trying to share his situation, and eventually, finally, he manages to convince one of his colleagues, the female producer and ultimately his love interest in the film, and he finally gets her to understand just by predicting so many of the events that are about to happen, that she realizes he can't actually be predicting these things without actually having relived and lived in these events. So he manages to get her to understand that he's trapped in this situation, but he still can't find a way out. And he's getting really down and really frustrated. And it's at this point in the film that things start to take a turn. And I think this is a really encouraging message for those of us who are listening right now who feel like we're stuck in this situation, we're trying to share our experiences and get things off our chest, and maybe it just, we feel like even doing that is a useless exercise because there's nothing that we can do to control or change this situation. There's nothing that we're going to do that is going to get us out of isolation, out of quarantine any faster really, apart from just sticking to the current precautions and the current guidelines, and eventually that is going to, in the future sometime with the future projections, is going to ultimately give us the means and give us the safety to start coming out of isolation again. But there's nothing that we can actually do today that's going to change that or even make it faster. So this is the turning point, and I think this needs to be the turning point for us right now. As I said, we've been in isolation for 3 to 6 weeks now, depending on where you're tuning in from. And this isn't going to change anytime soon. I think we have got probably another 6 weeks at least of this. Again, dependent on your country's circumstances. I know for us in the UK, we're doing 3-week updates. And actually today is the 3-week anniversary, if you like. The 3-week anniversary of us going into lockdown. I don't think anything's going to change in today's announcement. I think we're going to have another 3-week period where nothing's going to change. And then it's only perhaps after the 3-week period after that I think we're going to maybe start seeing some changes and start seeing some restrictions relaxed. Not necessarily we all go back to things that are normal and rosy again, but maybe just see things relaxed. So in short, we've still got some time in this situation. We've got to think about how we're going to make the best out of this situation. And this is what Phil Connors does in the film, is he starts, there's almost like this acceptance and this peace that comes over him saying, well, I'm stuck here, let's make the best of it. So he makes the best of it with these 2 letters that I've got down here. So the first way that he makes the best of it is he starts developing new skills. He starts learning how to play the piano. He starts reading. He learns a new language. He recognizes, well, actually, if I get to repeat every single day, I can go back and keep on learning these same skills over and over and over again. So one of the skills in particular that becomes fairly sort of central to the second half of the plot is he learns how to play the piano to a really high level. What he does is he starts investing in his skills. And when he starts investing in his skills, he starts to get this sense of purpose in this Groundhog Day. Although his day keeps on repeating, he's finding something that is different, that is changing, because his personal skills and abilities, even though the events of the day are the same, his skills and abilities are different each day. And this, I think, is a really important transferable lesson. I know that my mentors have been telling me this since the beginning of the isolation period, and I've been telling you guys, my audience, this since the beginning of the isolation period. If there's that thing that you have been putting off, there is no better time than now to start. You have, most of us at least, who aren't in the key worker category and don't have a ton of children running around the house. Key workers and busy parents probably are finding they have less time on their hands right now. But for the vast majority of us, we actually have more time on our hands right now. We can use this time to develop ourselves. So that language that you wanted to learn, that piece of software that you wanted to learn, that online course that you wanted to take, if there's a skill that you want to develop, you have this wonderful incubator period in which to develop it. And that's actually what Phil Connors had. He had this incubator period of the same day repeating again and again. He didn't have different distractions and he didn't have different duties. He had the same distractions, same duties, and he could use all the rest of the time to build and develop his skills. And that's what I think we need to be doing now. It can feel trapping, it can feel lonely, it can feel isolating right now, and it can feel like we're just sitting in Groundhog Day waiting for it all to be over. But if you want to have a sense of purpose in this time, if you want to have a sense of direction during this time, you can find this through developing your skills. This, as I said, is this incubator period where we can come out of the other side of this with something better. We can have a new skill, new ability, new hobby, new pastime, something that we can take beyond this into the future, beyond this into this brighter, more hopeful future that we're all waiting for. I know, for example, my father-in-law, he's an avid cyclist, and of course he hasn't been able to go out and do his cycling the way that he usually does. He goes on crazy long cycle rides of 100 kilometers or more. You're just not allowed to do that at this moment in time. So he's been doing virtual cycling. He's got a stationary bike in the garage, and he's got software which takes you on virtual routes. So he's cycling around the lakes in Italy and the valleys of Scotland. He's been able to get some of his cycling in this isolation period. And what he's also done is he's started a virtual community of cyclists. He actually has the first group in Scotland of virtual cyclists. And I suspect that this is something that he's going to end up taking out of this situation, where he has built this virtual community, he has these virtual routes. Because although summertime in Scotland is amazing, wintertime not so good, especially if you're trying to do these long cycles. If it gets icy and snowy in the winter, he can't go out biking in reality, but he can go out biking virtually. He can go and escape to those lakes in Italy when we have horrible snow and ice here in Scotland in the winter. So these are the types of things that we can take out of this situation. Develop your skills, develop your abilities. If you were waiting for the perfect time to do something, permission granted. That time has been given to so many of us in this current situation. Use that time. So this is the first thing that Phil Connors starts doing to gain that sense of purpose. The second thing that he starts doing is he starts contributing. Now, you might remember in my brief film synopsis right at the start, I said that Bill Murray's character, Phil Connors, was a very arrogant and egotistical man at the start. He only cares about himself. He's rude and unkind to a lot of people around him. Even his colleagues who he works with, he doesn't really take the time to connect with them. He doesn't really take the time to know them. In this period where he starts accepting his current situation, he starts being nicer to people. He starts being nicer to his colleagues. He asks them questions. He finds out a little bit more about their lives. He starts helping the people in the town. He gives money to a homeless person. He buys insurance off an insurance man who turns out to be one of his friends from school. He starts helping in the community. There's these old ladies who every single day they get a flat tire, and he goes and he replaces the tire for them each and every day. There's a child who every day falls out of a tree, and he makes sure he's there at that point to catch the child. And so he starts contributing to the people around him. He starts being nicer to the people around him. And I think that this is also an incredible opportunity that we have right now. We all have the ability to help and serve during this time. And this can be the very small stuff. It can be checking in with our neighbours, making sure they're okay. It can be buying food for people. It can be donating things to the food banks, for example, to donate food and supplies to those who can't afford it at this time. It can be giving money to some of the charitable causes, trying to buy protective equipment for our medical staff, trying to buy ventilators for the people who have coronavirus at the moment. We all have our particular way that we can be helpful and we can serve right now. It's not just the key workers who have essential parts to play during this time. We all have an essential part to play. We all have something that we can do to contribute and to make a difference right now. So the question I want you to be asking yourself is, how can I contribute? How can I make a difference? Because I think we've all been stuck in our personal isolation period during this time. Now it's time to start thinking about other people. And actually, to be honest, I feel that we've really seen the best of human nature starting to come out during this period, where I think actually, generally speaking, we are being a lot kinder to each other right now. We are looking out for each other a lot more right now. We are thinking about how we can be more helpful right now. And I feel this has been a real silver lining of this whole situation. And I really, really hope that after everything's said and done, this isn't something that just disappears again. I want us to maintain this increased sense of duty and contribution that we now find ourselves having, because I feel this has really highlighted the best of human nature in so many different ways. And actually, this ultimately proves to be how in the film Groundhog Day, Phil Connors manages to get out of this purgatory that he's in. Through developing his skills and through contributing to the people around him, he starts to develop this sort of kind of role model celebrity status in the town because of everybody that he's helping and all of the different things that he can do. People start flocking to him and they start noticing even though he has to start the relationships at the same point every single day, he's able to build up this kind of leader role in the town quicker and quicker each day. And in the final scene of the film, he helps to throw a party for the entire town, and he plays the piano as part of the music in the town, and all these people coming up to him, thanking him for how he's helped them, how he's made a difference in his life. And the love interest of the film, his fellow producer, who he was kind of, sharing his heart with and sharing his problems with at the halfway point in the film, she starts noticing this and she said, wow, this is a different side of you. I'd never seen this side of you before, because of course all she knows is the arrogant, egotistical weatherman that she first met. But she sees this different side of him, she falls in love with him, they spend the night together, and in the morning they wake up and it's the next day. Phil Connors has been able to escape Groundhog Day. And he didn't escape Groundhog Day through doing all the selfish, hedonistic things for himself. He didn't escape Groundhog Day through the depths of despair and even trying to take his own life. How he escaped Groundhog Day was he developed his skills and he started thinking about other people. He escaped Groundhog Day by becoming a better person. When he became a better person and he started to think of other people, he ultimately became attractive to his love interest that he'd actually tried to woo earlier in the film. But he didn't become attractive by trying to force himself upon her and be attractive to her. He managed to gain her love by becoming an attractive person. And I think there's a lovely moral even just in that part of the film, but particularly when applying it to right now, the way that I think that we can escape self-isolation And I don't mean this in the physical way of, yes, obviously at some point our governments are going to start lifting the restrictions, but the way that we escape self-isolation mentally, emotionally, spiritually, if you see things that way, is by becoming better people. When we come out of this isolation physically, are you going to be a better person? Are you going to be a different person? Are you just going to go back into the same old life that you were living before isolation? Or are you going to make a better life for yourself after this? I think this is a fantastic opportunity to reevaluate our lives, redesign our lives, and say, this is the person I want to be after this period. This is the type of life that I want to live after this period. And the way that we can come to that ultimate conclusion, I believe, is through developing our skills and contributing to others. And if that's how Phil Connors can get out of his Groundhog Day, I believe that's how we can get out of our Groundhog Day. So folks, I hope you've found this useful today. A bit of a sort of interesting look at things, doing something a little bit different. But hey, you know, this period, I think we're all having to do things a little bit different. So I've had good fun sharing these things with you. It's something maybe a little bit more silly and a little bit more fun than normal. I hope that you found that here today, tuning in. But I think there's also a really important message in this. And I actually think it's really worth going and watching this film during the isolation period. Let's face it, we've got a lot of time. And not that I'm knocking a little bit of hedonism during this time. If you want to have those glasses of wine, if you want to binge a Netflix season or two, that's cool. But just don't get stuck up here. Get down into this space. And this space is where we start to grow. This space is where we start to find that purpose. And I believe it's this space where we find that energy, find that hope, find that inspiration, find that determination that's ultimately going to get us through this and get us into the other side. So all I can say now is really just maintain that hope, maintain that inspiration, maintain that determination that we can and will get through this. We don't know how long this is going to last. We've been going through this for the medium term period of time already. We've been in this for a while. We've still got a while to go, but we can do this. We can make this. I know that I'm going to do my little part during this time. I'm developing a whole range of different skills right now. I'm really enjoying looking into things I've been wanting to look in for a while. And I've always been thinking over these last few weeks of what is my contribution? How can I help and how can I serve? What am I uniquely placed to do during this time? And it's going to be sessions like this and training like this, sharing hope and inspiration that I think is my contribution during this time. And I hope that this is something that is useful and helpful to you as we go through this period. So thank you everyone for joining me today. I have been seeing names flicking up as we've been going through the lives. I haven't been able to see anyone's comments, unfortunately, but I notice sometimes when I come off the live, there's a load of comments that I didn't see on in real time. So thank you for joining me today. I hope wherever you are in the world that you have a day of peace, a day of quiet solitude, and hopefully also a day of purpose and direction as well. Thank you folks for joining me today, and I'll speak to you soon.